FromSoftware games never manage to pull me in. I'm someone who enjoys challenging combat and regularly plays games on the hardest difficulty. However, the idea of difficulty in these games, which I gathered from watching other players' experience, did not attract me. I wasn't a fan of heavy emphasis on roll dodging or the sluggish pacing. The idea of losing main currency upon death and having to grind the same areas over and over for a tough boss didn't feel satisfying. Every time I got to know FromSoftware developed a new game, I stuck to watching the trailers and few gameplays of other players and never thinking about picking it up for me. But then in 2019, Sekiro Shadow Die Twice was released, and for the first time, a FromSoftware game convinced me to dive in. Sekiro Shadow Die Twice is still going to drive your blood pressure off the charts, but it is very different from other FromSoftware Souls-like offerings. I was mainly attracted to its gameplay, which encourages you to be aggressive. This game is easy to learn but harder to master. There is no weapon upgrade and no leveling system. No longer you are rolling all over the place till you find a split-second chance to attack to chip out enemies' health. This game doesn't have a stamina bar, it is replaced with posture bar. All you have to do is relentlessly attack while deflecting all the incoming attacks. When you learn to do that, posture bar will fill up. Then you can finish your enemy by performing a death blow. It is easier said than done, but again it is a purely learnable skill. Winning in this game is so satisfying because if you defeat an enemy, it is not because of your weapon or the level you are in. It is because you put your time and effort to analyze your enemy and react accordingly. If you master just the parrying mechanism in this game, that is enough to beat this game. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice opened with Sekiro, also known as Wolf, abandoned in a pit after a devastating battle where his master, the Lord Kuru, was captured. Wounded and without a purpose, Sekiro remained in hidden, seamlessly defeated. Days later, a mysterious letter reaches him, instructing him to reunite with Lord Kuru and escape Ashina Castle. After that, you are dropped into a battle with few small soldiers on your way. The first thing you realize is even these non-threatening looking soldiers can end you with few slashes. It is always wise to make the situation 1v1 rather than fighting a bunch of them at once. These soldiers even have an aggressive chain of attacks that could kill you in seconds if you are not careful. There was even a mini-boss in this area that was not very challenging, but it still contributed to setting the tone of the game. As Wolf attempts to flee with Kuro, they were interrupted by Genichiro Ashina, a powerful warrior who seeks to control Kuru's power. Wolf engages Genichiro in a fierce duel but ultimately defeated with a lost arm. Sekiro was saved by a skilled sculptor who gave him a prosthetic arm. This arm is more than a replacement for the arm he lost. At the start, Sekiro has the ability to grapple, which enables him to have the advantage of getting into high ground. This kind of fast movement was new to FromSoftware games. I felt the game is designed in a way for you to understand the game's mechanics when you reach Lady Butterfly's fight. Till that point, if you haven't learned to respect the game's deflection-based aggressive gameplay nature, rest of the game going to be very hard for you. Even though you are encouraged to play aggressively till this point, you can kind of cheat the system and still be successful. Though dodging is really hard in this game, with many tries, you can use hit and run method to kill bosses. But it is the least effective way to play this game. But in my case, I learned to respect the combat design. Maybe it is because I have never played the Souls game before. I try to deflect incoming attacks from the game's opening to get the best out of the combat design. I kept my eyes on enemies' posture bar when it closer to fill all the way. I kept my aggression. Sometimes this can give you similar results to panic rolling in other Souls game, but this is the most effective way to defeat bosses in this game. Instead of panicking, you just need to look for the correct opportunities and act accordingly. On your way to the Lady Butterfly fight, you will have to defeat a mini boss called Shinobi Hunter. Not like other enemies you fought till this point, to defeat this one you need to learn a special skill called Mikiri Counter. It is really hard to deflect thrust attack in this game. Mikiri Counter is the answer for that specific attack. When game introduces Mikiri Counter to the other mix of attack and deflection exchange between Wolf and enemy, Wolf's character is sharpened into an elegant shinobi. After defeating Gyubu Oniwa and many other mini-bosses on your journey to Ashina Castle, we will have to face Genichiro for the second time. This is where the game tests whether you have been fighting the way game combat design intended. This fight made a lot of players quit this game because it did not show any mercy for the players who didn't respect the game's combat design. This fight is impossible to win without deflecting the incoming attacks. When it comes to describing this game's combat design, I have seen the phrase "a rhythm game" is thrown away in so many places. While I partially agree with that statement, Sekiro is more than just a rhythm game. A player can treat this game as a time-based game and stop paying attention to the visual cues and just try to match the attack timing with deflection timing. But if you are willing to pay attention from the beginning of the fight and have the mentality of deflect, you will realize that it is not that hard to read incoming attacks. I'm not saying it is easy to get it right from the first place, but it is a lot faster than trying to sync the rhythm. I'll explain that using Genichiro fight. First, let's talk about the attacks marked with the danger sign in first two phrases. These attacks will usually kill you with one shot or take a significant amount of health out of you. Even though these attacks are marked with the danger symbol before the attacks comes towards the player, the sign itself does not tell what kind of attack it will be. In Genichiro's fight, 3 dangerous attacks are marked with the red danger symbol, and each is readable if you pay close attention. They are a thrust attack, a sweep attack, and a fist strike. Before Genichiro execute any of these moves, a visual or a sound cue signal the type of attack, allowing players to identify it. If the glow appears in the center, it is a thrust attack. You will need to counter it with the Mikiri skill. If the glow comes from the right, it is a sweep attack which needs to jump over to counter. The third attack is a fist strike, and here's where it gets tricky. Right before this move, Genichiro briefly sheathes his sword. It is subtle, but you can catch it if you listen to the faint sound of the blade sliding into the scabbard. Once you spot these cues, you will see that every danger marked attack can be anticipated and countered. But the hardest attack to survive is the floating passage attack performed by the Genichiro. At first glance, it looked like million slashes coming towards you with no mercy. Remember I told you the game would test whether you respected the game's combat design? Now you have the test in front of you. If you want to defeat Genichiro, you need to give right answer to this challenging question. The correct way to find a solution is to dissect the problem into small pieces so that you can look into those separately. If you try to analyze the floating facet attack, you will see you can separate this attack into 3 sections. The first 2 sections, followed by Genichiro turning full 180, are nothing more than 2 generic slashes. At this point, you should be able to deflect if you have been doing the deflection as a habit till this point. The chain attack in the middle is still scary, so it is better to keep it aside for now to figure it out later. Then the final powerful single hit is easily deflectable. Now you only have to figure out how to deflect the scary 6 attacks in the middle of the floating passage. The best way to learn this is to make up some space after the first 2 slashes. There's a clear delay there for you to move back. Then you can study how the attack in the middle plays out. If you take the first 2 slashes out of those 6 slashes, it is again generic 2 slashes that you should be able to deflect without any problem with the experience you have in the game so far. I agree, the other 4 slashes are very hard to visualize. But if you have been playing the game so far the way it intended, you could at least deflect 2 out of those 4 slashes. Or you can ignore all above, deflect the first 2 slashes in the floating passage, and still you will be able to defeat Genichiro, but it will increase the risk of you getting killed, because the longer you are in the fight, it is more likely for you to make a mistake. The third phrase in this fight is easier than the first 2 because of his lightning attack. I have a mixed feeling about this lightning attack introduction on this phrase. While it is a chance to take away a big chunk out of Genichiro's health, as the player, you encounter this attack for the first time, so if you don't deflect it, you are the one who's going to lose a big chunk of health and be open up to subsequent attack. I feel like FromSoftware should have introduced this attack before this fight using some other enemy. Just like Genichiro fight, every other fight in this game is a problem that has a solution no matter how intimidating it looks. The only requirement to overcome those challenging attacks is to study the attack patterns and provide the counter to them. Each of these enemies has different attack patterns and weaknesses. The long arm centipede has a fast rate of chain attack, and to overcome that you need to deflect all of them, because that scary attack is the opportunity provided by the game designed to defeat him. Origin of the Water has the shortest weapon in the game any mini-boss holds. Because of that, it is so hard to read her attacks, but her attacks are combined with spin movement. Understanding that is the way to defeat her. In the Guardian Ape fight, you need to take advantage of Flame Vent Prosthetic Tool because that is his weakness. In the Guardian Ape second phase, you need to use Loaded Spear to do lot of posture bar damage at once. Great Shinobi Wolf fight is very different from other fights because he uses a lot of dirty tricks. In this fight, you need to let the Shinobi Wolf set the rhythm of the fight, if not, he can make you a victim of his tricks. Among all the the bosses in Sekiro, Isshin the Saint stands out as the most beautiful and challenging encounter. The battlefield covered with tall grass with white flowers stands still as the fight starts. But as the battle rages on, the wind begins to howl and thunder starts to crack across the sky, transforming the scene into an otherworldly spectacle as if you were fighting the devil himself. To defeat Isshin, you will need to use all the skill you have learned so far and apply those perfectly. With each passing phase of the fight, combat gets intense. When you think it cannot get any better, he is going to pull up a new moveset or a weapon. Much to our surprise, he even has access to a gun in this melee-based game. Your prosthetic tool also play a huge part in this fight. You have to use whatever you have at your disposal to win this fight. I was able to find success by using loaded axe in the first phase to keep his posture bar up. Loaded spear for the second phase because he has a habit of keeping the distance after the lengthy attack chain. Sabimari was the perfect tool for the third phase because after you deflect his lightning attack, you have big opening to inflict him with poison. When you defeat him, it is totally because you learn to fight back without hesitation. You may be wondering what I think about the Elden Ring. Elden Ring is the most welcoming FromSoftware game to this day. You have plenty of options to choose from when it's come to play in the game. It even has the opportunity to play entirely as a long-distance character if players want that option. I picked up the game for myself to try it out. I like to play melee games with the parrying if possible. While it is possible to do so in Elden Ring, those shields have a specific time range that is effective. That effective time range is different from each type of shield. Because of this, you can't exactly perform reaction to action like in Sekiro. Parrying felt like sheer luck, but I was able to defeat Margaret spectacularly by parrying.
Passing skill. Warrior blood must truly run in thy veins. Tarnish.
From one game to another game, its game design is different. I shouldn't be expecting Sekiro from Elden Ring. So I kept learning the game mechanics, did experiments with the tools available to me. But by the time I defeated Renala, I lost interest in the game. Maybe it is because when the game combat design is hard, I want other part of the game to be easy. I prefer not to bother too much about leveling up, but I have to do it carefully, otherwise I'll end up not being able to use a cool weapon or a spell. While world building in Elden Ring maintain a high standard, I don't see the necessity of this game to be an open world game. Going open world forces them to use the same enemies repeatedly throughout the world. Most of the activities like exploring caves, catacombs and evergolds became uninteresting because most of the time the enemies you find in these locations will face you in between the paths to complete the game. Elden Ring is certainly a good game, but I don't think it is for me, at least for now. Maybe I'll give it another try someday. For now, Sekiro Shadow Die Twice remains as the only FromSoftware game I have truly enjoyed.
Little Rani, my dear daughter. weave thy night into being.